My name is Sebastian, and my ex-wife, Anna, and I had been married for 2 years before she destroyed what we had. Anna and I were colleagues at one time, but after I got an offer from a more prominent company, I resigned, and that was when we began to date. Before that time, Anna and I were not really the colleagues that got along with each other. She was reserved and barely associated with different people, except she was talked to. But despite being introverted, I still had a crazy crush on her. I can only tell her how I felt after I resigned because my former company was against coworkers dating. Luckily, when I told Anna how I felt about her, she admitted that she had the same feelings for me, too, and in no time, we began to date. I loved Anna's commitment to hard work, her smiles, her energy, and those crystal blue eyes. We got along so well, and I enjoyed every moment I spent with her, and when I eventually asked her to marry me, she said yes. For me, money was not an issue because I earned a lot of money from the tech company I worked with, and this also played a significant role in how I cared for Anna. On my own, I would drop by clothing stores and buy her clothes, shoes, jewelry, and everything she wanted, whether expensive or not. I also did this because I loved it when my woman looked good and classy. It boosted my ego. I really loved Anna, and I wanted her to be happy at all times. But aside from that, when it came to Anna, I didn't mind if she shopped every week or every month because I considered it as investing in her. Even when we were about to buy a house, I allowed her to pick the house she liked despite not liking it that much because I believed that if she was happy, then I'd be happy. Yet after everything I did for her, she went ahead and cheated on me with my blood. Everything was going fine between Anna and me, but after the incident of a flood that destroyed many houses last year, I was forced to let my cousin and his wife move in with us. They had to begin life from square one because they lost everything they had, and the least I could do was support them. So my cousin and his wife asked if they could move in with us until they got back on their feet, and after I discussed it with Anna, we decided to let them live with us. Anna was thrilled to receive them, and I was glad she would always have company at home, especially when I was not around. Also, the nature of her job allowed her to work from home, and it felt good to know that she would no longer feel lonely while she worked. Little did I know that I allowed my wife to cheat on me with my cousin. The funniest thing was his wife, and I did not notice anything fishy. Whenever we returned from work, they'd act all cool with each other and didn't leave room for suspicion. My cousin, on the other hand, betrayed my trust and repaid me by screwing my wife whenever his wife and I went to work. One weekend, Anna went grocery shopping and asked me to help her fold the clothes in the closet, and that was how I stumbled on her diary tucked under a small pile of unfolded clothes. At first, I didn't want to invade her privacy, but I was curious to know what a 28-year-old woman was writing about, and to my greatest surprise, I found out that my wife and my cousin had been sleeping with each other a month after they moved in with us. I could not believe my eyes and was heartbroken to find out she could do that to me after everything I had done for her. A part of me wanted to throw her out, as well as my cousin, but I wanted to hurt her for doing such a thing to me. I didn't even fold the clothes anymore because I didn't want her to find out that I knew. I simply came up with an excuse that I wasn't feeling okay, and she believed me. I continued to pretend everything was fine, but as soon as I got myself together, I contacted a lawyer, and he started processing our divorce papers. I also made plans for my cousin because I wanted him to feel my pain. After a couple of weeks, I decided it was time to bust them, so I pretended to leave for work, but I hid in the tool shade of our house. When Anna and my cousin thought I left, they came outside, entered the car, and began to kiss before they drove out, and I took pictures of them and sent it to my cousin's wife. I knew she'd come back home in anger, and she did. She initially denied everything until I showed her my pictures that morning. When she realized she could no longer lie, she began to cry and blame my cousin for seducing her, but it was too late. I kicked her and my cousin out of the house, informed her about the divorce papers, and warned her to stay away from me and my house. Some months later, we divorced, and I blocked her on all social media platforms. My cousin's wife divorced him, too, and luckily for them, they didn't have a child yet. Even after the divorce, Anna tried to come to me a few times, but there was nothing I could do at that point. I hated everything about her. She wanted to tell me she was no longer with my cousin, but that was her loss, not mine. Though it's been a while, my heart still aches, and I know it will be all over soon. But I'm way happier now, and my new girlfriend and I are taking things one step at a time. Opie, I can't even imagine what it felt like for you to know that your wife was secretly sleeping with your own cousin. It must have really hurt you to know that your cousin broke your trust, too, and took your act of kindness for granted. It was really inhuman of them to do that. It's great that you divorced her and moved on quickly because she did not deserve you. In no time, you'll forget about her entirely and you'll be able to move on to better things. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now, let's move on to the second story of the day. My wife and I had been married for 25 years, but in the end, I realized she was using me. I'm sharing this here because it has been a burden in my heart, and hopefully, it will clear off after I share it. The first time Maya and I met was on Christmas Eve. I went shopping as usual to grab a few stuff for the celebration the next day, and unexpectedly, the mall I shopped at was out of stock, leaving me with the last pack of the stuff I needed. Maya was already shopping with her younger sister, Kat, and when they realized I had the last box they needed, they were very disappointed. When we were about to make payment at the counter, she kept complaining to the sales representative that her Christmas had just been ruined because of that, and she could not afford to go to the next mall, which was miles away. Finally, when she kept complaining, I was forced to pay for the stuff and hand it to her because of her sweet little sister, and I left the mall. About 3 days later, I met her again at the Christmas party my town organized, and she remembered me immediately. Then, we were both very young, and we hung out with each other the whole evening. Shortly after that, we became close friends, hung out with more, and eventually, she became my girlfriend. Maya and I were so much in love and passed through many seasons of our lives together. We dated for 4 years and got married after that. The craziest thing was my family disapproved of Maya. To be precise, my dad didn't like her, and he kept saying there was something about her that he could not place his fingers on. But I loved Maya, and I wasn't going to let anyone separate us from each other. So, I got married without my parents' approval, which worsened my relationship with them. Maya's parents, on the other hand, did not have any problem. They blessed our marriage, and from there, we went ahead to rent our own apartment. We started living together as a couple, and I worked hard to make life easier for us. I didn't even go to college. I chose the carpentry career, and with the money I made from it, I had to sponsor Maya to college because I could see how much she wanted to further her education. To be honest, there was nothing that Maya wanted that I didn't give to her, even after several years of being married to each other. We had 2 kids together, and I did my best to provide for my family. When Maya finished college, she got a job and the pay was good, but I wasn't concerned about her money. I wanted her to be comfortable, so all she had to do was take care of minor bills while I took care of rent and groceries. Then we'd split the children's school fees. I made sure I gave her the dream life she wanted, and I had to make a lot of sacrifices for that to happen. Whenever I could, I'd buy her new stuff or give her money to go shopping at least once in 3 months. Of course, all our vacations and trips were solely my responsibility, but I didn't mind because she was my wife, and I believed it was my responsibility to treat her right. And in all the 25 years of being married to her, I never cheated on her because I wouldn't tolerate her if she did the same thing to me. So I tried as much as possible to stay away from anything that would lead to infidelity on my side. Despite being married for so long, my parents refused to talk to me, so I never visited them for Christmas, and our kids had only seen pictures of my parents. Because of that, I was forced to embrace Maya's family as my own. For example, when Martha's parents' house needed renovation, I paid heavily for that because I could not leave my work to renovate her parents' house. Martha didn't even contribute a dime because she believed it was my responsibility to do that as her parents' only son-in-law, and I didn't mind doing all of that, too, because they were the only family I had. Everything was going well between us. We were a big, happy family until Maya started falling sick. When it didn't stop as expected, we went to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and the doctor said she only had a few months to live. The news hit me like an explosion, and I could not imagine losing Maya after spending all those years with her. My legs were weak, so I managed to sit on one of those long seats in the lobby. While I was still trying to wrap my head around the bad news, I saw a man screaming at the same doctor who spoke to me. At first, I thought he had lost someone because of how heartbroken he looked, but when the doctor came to me to confirm if I was Mr. Wesley, Maya's husband, and introduced the man yelling to be Maya's boyfriend, I felt my head spin. Maya's boyfriend and I stood there for minutes, looking at each other in shock. When I finally calmed down, I asked him how he had met Maya, and he said he had been dating Maya for a very long time, and she led him to believe that she was single and had divorced a very long time ago. He told me about their intimacy, dates, and how they had lunch every day. He even said that he had gotten a ring and was ready to propose to her until he got the news of her sickness. From how he spoke, it was undeniable that he had fallen deeply in love with Maya. I explained to him that Maya and I had been married for 25 years with 2 kids, and I was even planning a surprise renewal of vows wedding on her birthday. Evidently, we both had plans for Maya, but she used us and lied to us, even breaking our promise of never cheating on each other. Finally, after crying for a while, Maya's boyfriend told me he was leaving the hospital and would never return because Maya deserved what she got, and that was the last time I saw him. I felt so used, lied to, and backstabbed, and I couldn't help but agree that she deserved what she got. I even sat there for hours, trying to convince myself that I had a bad dream, but it was not a bad dream. It was 100% reality. Finally, when I could put myself together, I picked up my dignity and paid Maya the last visit. I walked to her room door and saw her tubed up and IVs inserted in both hands. I wiped my last tears there in the hallway, in front of her room door, and after I was done, I went to my car and drove off. Months later, her condition worsened, as the doctors had predicted, and it got so bad that she got into a coma and depended on life support. Finally, when it looked like she would not get better, I signed that enough was enough and let her go. After she passed away, all of her properties and the things she owned were given to me, and I consider them as my pay for all the sacrifices I made for her. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget her and how she betrayed me. Opie, finding out the truth must have been very hard for you, especially after 25 years of being married to Maya. To even think that you had a messy relationship with your parents because of Maya, and in the end, it was not worth it. Maya deserved what she got. She played you and threw away what you had with each other after dating for years and being married for 25 years. I'm genuinely sorry, and I understand that healing from this and getting over it is not going to be easy, but I know that you can do it, and no matter how you write it, I understand how deeply it hurts. I believe you need a lot of self-love and time with your children. For now, you can take a break from relationships to heal properly. Then you can go back whenever you're ready, and if you're not, there's no problem with that. Remember that you're a strong man, and we are all rooting for you. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, Comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Permit me to begin by stating that I am a typical person. When I say this, I mean that I come from a normal, intellectual family, and that from a young age, I was instilled with the belief that love and trust are the cornerstones of every healthy relationship. Also, nature did not hinder my look in any way, and as a result, I have a sporty figure. I sustain this physique by murdering it under the weights in the gym. My masculine ego was unavoidably bolstered as a result of the fact that the female sex was always sympathetic to me. Having said that, the morals and ethics of my family, which were strongly instilled in me from a young age, did not let me to live an unrestrained masculine lifestyle. Despite the fact that I had a lot of female admirers, I always believed that woman you love should be your role model. Your mother is the only other person who can compare to the purity and brightness of your temple, and although it doesn't really have anything to do with my narrative, I will tell you that I have been interested in aviation ever since I was a kid, and that the sky and aircraft are my most favorite things in the world. This is a component of who I am. Because of this, I enrolled in the Higher Civil Aviation School. After graduating from that school and navigating my way through a maze of different committees, tests, and training centers for flight crews, I was finally awarded my pilot's license and proudly took the right seat in the cockpit of a Boeing 737 as a co-pilot trainee for a major airline. I then began to hone my skills of taming the steel bird in the sky while accumulating experience and flight hours. Another significant character in my narrative is a good buddy of mine named John. To me, he was like an older brother. We had known one another since we were little children, even before we entered high school. He was a man who had stood the test of time and with whom I had been involved in a variety of tales and all manner of difficulties. Hence, I made it a point to ensure that he would never betray or defraud anybody. We were always there for each other, and we helped each other out in a variety of different situations. When it comes to individuals like that, they claim that with him, whether in the heat of combat or on a reconnaissance mission, or whatever it is that they assert, but John did have one major flaw in his character. He was just not a good person to be around women. It has always been easier for him to establish common ground with women and to acquire what he wants from them because to the great charm and tongue-in-cheek humor that nature bestowed upon him. He was always skilled at manipulating women in the manner that he desired. Because he possessed all of these skills, he was also able to advance his career at one of the most important trading companies. His one and only conviction was that a woman is another woman who is yearning for a man, and that in order to have a successful relationship with a woman, all you need to do is be able to read her, locate her hidden buttons and levers, and then use your power to manipulate them. And any stunning lady, whether she a fresh-faced college student or a seasoned executive, will be vying for a spot in your bed. In addition to being a psychologist, he was a narcissist. I'm sorry to say it, but he really did have a talent for convincing people. It would appear that this was the reason for the meteoric rise of his career. And so were the airplanes that carried me into the clouds. The reason he did not try to get married was because he believed that a woman should not be revered if a guy did not want to go through the pain of being in love with her. This was the topic of our ongoing disagreements. He had a negative outlook on women in general and said that there was not a single woman alive today with whom he could share his life and make it meaningful. I challenged his assertion and pointed out that he simply had not loved anyone genuinely up to that point. All he said in response was, "Dude, get down to earth already. There are no perfect women." This may seem metaphorical, but in reality, I was in heaven while he was on earth. It was just coincidental that at various points in time, but John and I both found ourselves in the same crimp city in the end. At the time, he was serving as the commercial director for a big corporation in the same city in which I was employed by an airline that had a base at a certain airport. I was relieved that life did not force us to become apart from one another. And even when we were there, We kept up our normal conversation. Now, about the girl on dating. Rihanna is her given name. It was fate that brought us both to the restaurant where we first met. One of our gals, who works as a flight attendant, had her birthday today, and we all got together to celebrate. She was a close friend of one of her family, which was a happy coincidence. We were all seated at the same table, so we were going to be in close proximity to one another. She had a natural blonde hair color, velvety skin, and a lovely, elegant walk to go along with her stunning good looks. I had the impression that I would never be able to forgive myself if I did not make an effort to become more familiar with her. I decided to take a risk, and as the slow music started playing, I asked her to dance with me. She said yes. The fact that I had only recently returned from another trip contributed to the trust that others had in me. Specifically, the flying outfit that I was wearing at the time. She retorted in a flirtatious manner, "How can you say no to a man in uniform?" While we gently walked to the beat of the music and spoke, she continued to flirt with me. We discussed my career as a pilot in detail. She questioned me with a keen curiosity about the techniques used in the airplane kitchen. It was very clear that she found my company to be very enjoyable. She informed me about herself, including the fact that she worked as a translator of foreign languages and that she and her sister had been sharing a rental flat for the last 4 years. By the time the night was through, I got the impression that I had known her for a very long time. When you are really close to someone and you discover that you are both on the same wavelength, there is a sensation that can only be described as, "She is my ideal." I already have something within me, something really powerful that lay dormant within me. It was quite difficult for me to let go of her and say goodbye. When it was finally time for us to leave, I asked her in a very pushy manner whether she would like me to walk her home. After she gave her assent, we hurriedly made our way to the nearest subway station, crammed ourselves onto one of the departing train's final cars, and dashed in the direction of the city's southwest. We carried on our conversation all the way there, and the more we talked, the more intriguing I found her to be. The question of whether or not she was married, and whether or not she had a partner was, of course, one that I had to answer for myself eventually. She shared with me that it had been a few months after the termination of her most recent relationship, and that she had just lately emerged from the sadness that accompanied the loss of the relationship. This fact, for some reason, drew my attention to her earnestness, making me wonder whether she was worried about it. We climbed the stairs to her level. As we were leaving, I grasped her hand and told her that I would want to see her again, and that I had a good time throughout the evening. She stated that she believed in my concept 100%, and we each gave each other our phone numbers. It was becoming late, and the metro was out of service, so she was concerned about how I would get home. I couldn't help but bring this out to her, and I told her that I would call a cab. She was concerned about both of these things. I had another flight the next day, so I had to get going. I gave her a call and extended an invitation to join me at the restaurant when I got back to the city. She responded with a positive answer, and I proceeded to make reservations for the day that I would be flying back to the other city. We kept in touch via text message. On the way back tonight, we would be reunited, and I couldn't wait to see her again. My thoughts kept going back to her constantly. In the evening, we got back together in a restaurant where we had dinner together and continued our time together. I felt like a young kid who had developed feelings for a fellow student in his class. After that, we made it a point to see each other nearly every day, or at least as frequently as my traveling schedule would permit. She came to visit me quite frequently, which made my sister anxious since she was concerned about how she was doing. I showed her my appreciation with presents and flowers, and I even penned some songs for her on my guitar. There was no cap on how much creativity might be generated. My friend John and I didn't always have the same work schedules, so we got to see each other in a new light. It was either because I was away on a trip or because he was out on business. I was overjoyed to be able to tell him about meeting an incredible girl, and I did so over the phone. I did not know how I would have survived without her. I waved him off, saying, with your approach, you will never find good girls. Everything went on as it was. I invited Rihanna to live with me in the apartment that I rented the airline. She agreed to live with me on the condition that I would get to know her sister, and she would make sure she let her go into good hands. One day, I was able to meet John. He wanted to share the joy of going to LA with me. I told him that I would never find good girls with. The period of the relationship gradually went from its tumultuous phase to a more measured and quiet one. I would go off on flights and on each day to my job. At times, I wasn't home for days at a time, and when our weekends coincided, we spent time together, doing household chores, going to the supermarket to shop, and riding our bikes. We gradually stuck to each other. At times, when possible, I would spike with John. He was in the United States. I was in a come on, let's not waste any time, and I'll put you in touch with Rihanna, and you'll get a glimpse of what it's like to be a woman. Abos calmed himself down and added, there's no such thing. In any case, the previous half-year raced past for him in this manner. The management of the airline made the decision to promote me to the post of co-pilot on tourist flights due to the fact that I already had experience flying and was in the training program. I was glad, and Rihanna shared my joy in the accomplishment. By the way, this adjustment guaranteed a raise in compensation, notwithstanding the extra time spent away from family and friends. I finally got to the point where I could tell Rihanna that tomorrow I have a flight with the flight committee and the inspecting instructors. After that, I should be approved as a co-pilot. A week earlier, Jonah had contacted me and urged me in a happy voice to wait for me in the nation where I was born, simultaneously with the purpose of introducing him to my queen. I was able to get out on my flight after acing all of the examinations that were given to me. After that, I felt a sense of accomplishment whenever I saw my new job listed in my paperwork without the phrase trainee. John got in touch with me while I was gone. When I got home, we came to an agreement that the three of us would go out, sit in the center, and listen to stories about the United States as a way to celebrate my promotion. However, by the time I got there, the weather had a lot of room for improvement. Our plans to meet up at a cafe outside were foiled by the heavy rain that fell throughout the day. Therefore, we agreed to get together in the house that Rihanna and I share. I drove to one of the metro stations and picked up John there while I was driving away from the airport in the automobile. During the ride, he told me, I won't talk about America for now. The evening is still to come. But I'll tell you how I fucked a girl like that the other day. He was referring to the fact that the nighttime had not yet arrived. I know you won't believe it, but I laughed once more. Wow, when can you do that? Others exclaimed, but he didn't slow down since he was eager for his next success. John continued by describing in poetry and color how he'd gotten off with another beauty by saying that he was a poet. By the way, she had a boyfriend, he said. Only he was away somewhere on a business trip. So the girl went off the rails. But she did such things. I'll tell you, he probably doesn't satisfy her at all. She's off the chain, got her number. I'll have to do it again. I must admit, honestly, that it was unpleasant to hear it. And I was mentally sympathizing in absentia with the guy that this girl had. Rihanna came out into the hallway to greet us upon hearing the rustling in the hallway. Hello, she pronounced. At that moment, John, kicking off his boots, said, Good evening. And when he looked up at her, he changed his face in an instant. By the way, Rihanna also had a very strange reaction to John, as though she was surprised, not understanding that reaction. I then proceeded to introduce them and called Rihanna my girlfriend. And what I thought, when John suddenly complained of a sharp deterioration in his well-being and said he had to leave immediately, I became increasingly confused and didn't understand anything. I offered to call him an ambulance on the spot. But he flatly refused and said he'd rather go home. Rihanna, who had been asked a lot about John in the past, was quiet in the moment and didn't ask any questions. Even though that kind of behavior wasn't her style, John was batting his eyes at, and then she said that she was very tired and dizzy. I ended up going to bed in total confusion and irritation. Rihanna insisted that she needed to do the dishes and unwind. I fell asleep and didn't wait for Rihanna to help with the dishes. The following day, I had the day off as promised. John called and offered to meet me. His voice was very agitated. I was determined to keep talking though. In any case, I have no choice but to inform you about it. If you don't want to know me after that, I understand. I stiffened. Speak up. He continued. Remember on the way home yesterday, I was telling you about a girl I was having fun with the other day. At this point, I begin to intuitively know what he's talking about. I felt something taut inside of me and about to rip. If I had been standing at this point, my legs would have just started to tighten. I was getting ready to hear the worst, although my icon, my temple, and my wife desecrated, and by my own best friend. At first, I sat there in a daze, and then, as I began to come back to reality, my typical conditioned reflex kicked in, as it often does. I'm sorry, but I didn't know she was your girlfriend at the time. It slipped out. I couldn't believe it. My icon, my temple, and my wife desecrated, and by my own best friend. When this occurred, I gave John a hard slap to the face with both hands. Immediately after I did so, I heard screams coming from the people sitting at the nearby tables, and then a couple of guys came rushing up sharply. The security guard grabbed hold of us and started dragging us in different directions, gradually pushing us toward the exit. John, rubbing his ears and making a long face, yelled, "That's it." We gently sat back down, but the security guard for the cafe and the men at the tables around us would not move away from us out of fear of more conflicts. In an effort to somehow defuse the situation, I stated that we had already reached a point where we were able to cool down. They reluctantly walked away from us, and we were still the object of the entire cafe's attention. Until, as time passed, everyone gradually went back to their business. I sat there and hated everyone and everything around me. Rihanna, John, my job, which I really just idolized. I didn't know what to think, what to feel. John said, well, I was basically ready for that. He was slowly starting to get a black eye, and I was in complete prostration. My world had collapsed. I thought at that moment that I had lost the woman I loved and my best friend in one day. John kept repeating that he didn't know who she was. He kept saying words of forgiveness. I was depressed. I sat and listened to him and felt like I was drunk. Then we went outside. I didn't say anything. He offered to take a cab to take me home. I refused, but he came with me anyway. I looked out the window while we were in the cab, and I didn't care. Rihanna was in the kitchen drinking tea. The TV in the kitchen was off, despite the fact that he always came on when he was there. Obviously, she was getting ready too. From my look, she realized that I already knew. All I felt was pain, burning my soul. The awareness of betrayal, like there was a knife sticking out of my back. Finally, I told him not to call or get in touch with me. If anything, I would call him myself. He said okay and left. It was almost as if he had me in a trance. I felt sick to my stomach and instantly recalled from the center the phrases about women's levers and buttons. It turned out that he had located them. Please forgive me. Rihanna sobbed and kept repeating, I'm sorry, I love you. Only now it sounded so nasty out of her mouth, so insincere, like a burp. I asked her to stop saying those words. How did he spend his time with her? She said, it's just that you're away from home for so long you're on trips. It's okay. It's as simple as that. I'm just away for so long. And she gave herself to the one who was competently hitting on her. We talked for a long time that night. I kept trying to understand the true mechanism of her infidelity, the reasons behind it, and I still could not justify what she had done. There was a flight in the morning. I left the house in silence, not even saying goodbye to Rihanna. She tried her best to woo me, made me coffee and breakfast, but I didn't feel like anything. There was a flight in the morning. I collapsed on my bed and passed out. There was a flight in the morning. I did not summarize the results of our conversation that evening, which slowly turned into night. I was emotionally exhausted and fell into a deep sleep. She went back to her sister's house, even though she cried and tried to talk for a long time. I was never able to forgive her, even though my heart demanded forgiveness. However, I decided that I would survive this breakup and preserve my dignity and respect for myself. I am accustomed for my flying work to rely on a cold mind and common sense calculation. Moreover, she was not going to admit it. And he did not know who Rihanna's girlfriend was, despite the fact that felt guilty about it for a long time. What about me? Now I frequently return home after flights to young flight attendants. I began to take advantage of what nature had given me and enjoy the pleasure of interacting with different women. I began to get what I did not get in my youth, breaking, so to speak, the patterns of pure, sincere love. Now I do not know what should be a woman with whom I trace my life. The next story is even more interesting. It tells how the wife succumbed to the influence of her husband's best friend and cheated with him. After that, the husband found out and decided to take revenge. Watch to the end. A graduation celebration was the setting for Elisa and Sebastian's first sexual encounter, a time when she and Simon had just recently begun dating. Because Simon had much too much alcohol earlier in the evening, he fell asleep in one of the rooms just a few hours after the party had begun. He slept soundly throughout the night, and it was around that time that his closest buddy and his girlfriend were overtaken by a sudden desire for one another. After what they had done, they both became aware of what they had done and made a pact not to recall it in the future and to conceal it, particularly from Simon. That's exactly what the girl did too. She tried to wipe that night from her life and memory, but Sebastian was a lot better at doing so than she was. He persisted in attempting to entice her by reminding her of it again and over. But Elisa remained unmoved, and she persistently pointed out to the poor lover that Simon was truly only his buddy. After he had finished his service in the army and had remained there for a number of additional years under contract, he finally succeeded in convincing Elisa to go through with the experience again one day, which was quite a few years after they had first met. The young woman heaved a sigh of relief and prayed that Sebastian would find happiness elsewhere and never reappear in her or Simon's lives again. After waiting another year, the two young people decided to take the plunge and be married. Shortly after the ceremony, Elisa presented her new husband with a test that had two vivid pink stripes. After another 9 months had passed, Simon was cuddling a beautiful baby girl who resembled him in every way. The man insisted again and over that his closest companion had not been present for any of the significant moments in his life. Sebastian was unable to escape the ceremony for the wedding, and as a result, he was unable to attend the birth of his friend's daughter. Even though they continued to communicate with one another through phone conversations and messages, Simon felt as like he was losing out on the face-to-face engagement. It was as if Sebastian had never been absent from their lives. One day, he just showed up on their doorstep and informed them that his military commitment was finished and that he was now back in town. Elisa was shocked and upset by the information while Simon was pleased. The fact that Sebastian had grown up while he was serving only contributed to his irritation. During that time, he had lost weight and his physique had become more toned, and he could see signs of relief in the contour of his body that was apparent under his shirt. Unconsciously, she cast a peek in the direction of her ex-lover as he removed his coat. Even if he didn't show it, Sebastian realized that she was looking at him. Now, She was much more concerned that her friend had accidentally let slip to her husband the details of their affair than she had been before. The woman was unable to get any rest when her husband was away at a party with him and his colleagues because she worried that anything would go wrong while he was away. She was anxious since it is a well-known fact that what a person thinks about while they are sober will eventually come out of their mouth when they are intoxicated, and it looked like Sebastian was trying his best to make up for lost time. He continued to hover about Simon and Elisa's house, urging Simon to sit down and chat to him on a regular basis, while also attempting to assist his ex-mistress in caring for the kid. In point of fact, Elisa didn't trust herself in this predicament the most of all. Even though she was aware that she had cheated on her husband twice with this man for a specific purpose, she continued to feel drawn to him, despite the fact that she vehemently rejected that this was the case inside herself. Since he had returned, the woman's previous boyfriend had been a recurring theme in her nighttime dreams, and it was getting to the point where it was driving her insane. When Simon observed his wife, he found that she had grown tight and apprehensive. Elisa was growing irritated with her kid, even though she was still quite little, and was taking it out on her husband over the smallest of infractions. The guy believed that the whole thing was due to the fact that his outgoing and social wife had been exhausted during her maternity leave as a result of the strain of day-to-day living on it. After a long day at work, he did everything he could to help his beloved relax by distracting her and their daughter with activities like going for a walk or paying a visit to his parents. But none of this has been of any use thus far. All of her husband's wonderful actions made Elisa feel worse. She was angry with herself for ever considering the possibility of another man. For all, the guy she married was such a wonderful human being. He looked for the family as well as her. Sebastian sexually assaulted his friend's wife on several occasions while his buddy was not looking. He also attempted to kiss and touch his previous mistress while she was trapped in a corner by Sebastian. Up to this point, the lady had been able to effectively tear herself away from his grasping hands. But every fiber of her being shouted and pled for her to give Sebastian the opportunity to continue. She yelled in his ear, "Stop it," as she struggled to remove his hands from her hips. "Have you even a little bit lost your mind? Because I care so much for you, yes." He gave her a grin in return. "I will disclose everything to my spouse requesting that you desist. And I that we have completed this task several times," said Sebastian, "who you think you would have faith in your opinion." Elisa was aware of the futility of disputing in this particular circumstance. She had no idea what to anticipate from Sebastian in that regard. After all, he truly does have the potential to destroy her marriage. A brief conversation between the wife and her husband. On Simon's 30th birthday, they had a passionate encounter. He was unable to drink, just as he was when he was a student. And once again, after a few hours of celebrating, he went to sleep and experienced his ninth dream. It was on this day that Elisa was set free. She hired a home in the countryside, where she hosted a party for her husband and a large group of their friends. Elisa set a nice table. Because there were so many people, the table was too small to accommodate everyone who wanted to sit there. It was a lively and enjoyable event, but Simon had too much alcohol due to his happiness. As soon as Elisa exited the room in which she had just tucked her husband into bed, Sebastian was there to greet her. He didn't waste a single second. The woman relaxed her guard and let her guard down. She consumed an excessive amount of alcohol, which led to a mental state in which she was easily persuaded to give herself up to her ex-lover. The following morning, she saw Sebastian smoking outside on the porch. Elisa retaliated violently when he attempted to stop her by grabbing her arms, but he was unsuccessful. Once more, she held herself responsible for what she had done, as well as her lack of strong willpower. The man snapped back fiercely. "Yes, stop. You are doing just fine. Let go." Everything was done in error. Please allow me to forget about it. She sent a pitiful glance in his direction as she stared at him. Why do you not give in? You thought highly of everything. He laughed as he thought about how poor Simon was in the bedroom. Elisa gave it one more pull, and she was eventually successful in releasing her hand. But the moment that both of them turned around, they spotted Simon standing in the entranceway of the room. From the look on his face alone, it was instantly apparent that he had heard everything and, of course, comprehended everything. The man was so enraged that he couldn't tell who it was anymore. With a drawn-out cry, he hurled his fists at his buddy and tossed him into the snow. The man's friend was left lying in the snow. After that, a battle broke out, which Sebastian, with his proficiency in hand-to-hand combat, was clearly winning. Simon was so overcome with rage that he acted rashly and hit without thinking. The guys were able to pull them apart, despite the fact that the combatants continued to yell insults at each other and struggled to get away from the men who were trying to help them. The move has already been made to Simon's wife. Elisa felt her chest tighten as she looked at the angry tears in her boyfriend's eyes. Even though she was well aware of the amount of love that her partner had for her, she still went ahead and did this to him. At that very instant, she despised herself more than anyone else in the world. Simon had the initial intention of going straight to the apartment and tossing all of his cheating wife's belongings out the window, but a coworker cautioned him against taking such drastic action. After all, Elisa had a trump card up her sleeve, and that was their daughter. With their daughter, Elisa could simply deny their daughter's father to visit his daughter. Simon came to the conclusion that it was a reasonable suggestion and made an effort to calm down. However, he was quick to file for divorce and did so as quickly as possible. However, Elisa did not stop to consider the possibility of forbidding her husband to visit his daughter. She was so embarrassed by her actions and the suffering she had brought onto Simon that she would never have dared to act in that manner again. She begged him over and over again to forgive her, but Simon remained unyielding in his refusal to do so. The double betrayal, especially because it took place in front of all of his pals, really upset him. Simply put, he was unable to forgive his wife for doing this to him. It should come as no surprise that he also severed all forms of connection with Sebastian, and so did his former spouse. The woman went home to her parents in order to get ready for her first day of work. Someone needed to look after the little girl since she was in danger. They were horrified by what their daughter had done, yet they did not turn down a request for assistance. She struggled for a considerable amount of time to develop her personal life. It turned out that every single one of the men that she encountered on her journey was a scoundrel. She would frequently come home from work exhausted, put her daughter to bed, and then proceed to sob uncontrollably while covering her face in a pillow while doing so. That's how the tale goes. Please let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on the current scenario and how I guess you could say I started from the bottom and now I'm here. I became an engineer by the age of 29. I had a few non-serious girlfriends during that time. I never told them what I was studying because I never felt like they needed to know. I guess I was pretty mysterious in my dating life. I did the same thing when I met my future wife. She didn't have very much money, but she could take care of herself. While we dated, she met my uncle a few times at family gatherings because I wanted him to help me decide if she was a great quality woman. My uncle became an involved father figure to me after my father died when I was young. My wife knew this, but she didn't know that he owned a nightclub in San Antonio that we frequented in our dating and early married life. I opened my own tech store, so I was there a lot. My wife worked with me side by side for years. My elderly mother cleaned the office for us sometimes, even though I told her to take it easy. She lived in the same house as my wife and I, but she never intruded on our space because the house was big enough for us all. She cleaned for us, and I guess that was the most invasive she got, but my wife actually complained about this to me. She was annoyed that my mom walked in on her changing and routingly put her clothes away in the wrong drawers. I was shocked and mad that she was complaining about this. My mother was being so sweet by taking care of our laundry for us, even folding it and putting it away. It was extremely inconsiderate and unfair for my wife to complain like she was. This was my mother, not a maid that stole from her or something. I put her in place about this, making it clear that she can forgive my mother for any accidents or organizational mishaps because we love and appreciate her and what she does. After this, my wife was pretty passive-aggressive towards me, and she started looking at her phone a lot, even as we worked at the shop together. When I asked her about it, she told me she wanted to go out with her friends since it had been a while. I reminded her that I had to work late to label new inventory. She said she knew that, and she was hoping I wouldn't mind if she went alone with her girlfriends. Knowing she would probably go to my uncle's club, I let her. I was suspicious, so I told my uncle that she was behaving this way, and he told me he'd keep an eye on her. I stayed working late while she went out with girlfriends. This same thing happened several more times over the course of a few months. On the sixth night she went out, my uncle called me. He told me he'd seen her come in with the same guy several times. She was sending me pictures of herself, but never with a man beside her. My uncle said he was across from her whenever she took a picture. She even asked some girls she didn't know to pose in a picture with her so I'd believe her. We decided to confront her mafia style. I drove there, snuck up to the third-floor balcony, and waited, dressed in a suit, for security to bring my wife and AP to me. They were super confused and irritated at first, but when my wife saw it was me, her face turned a light shade of green. My uncle stepped forward and told them he owned this venue and knew she was cheating on his nephew. AP was dumbfounded. Then my uncle left us alone so that we could talk. She started apologizing profusely, begging me to forgive her because she didn't know my uncle owned this place. I asked how that was supposed to pardon her from cheating on me. I said it was lucky I kept his ownership a secret, otherwise she might have gotten away with dating this guy as long as she wanted. She took this chance to tell me they never slept together, and that AP is gay, so I should forgive her, and we could pretend this never happened. She looked at him like she needed him to lie for her. I could see everything that happened between them, but my wife tried really hard to look innocent and truthful. I asked AP if this was true, or if he had sex with my wife. He looked extremely nervous and put on the spot. He asked if I was going to kill him, which gave me a good laugh. Once I assured him I wouldn't, he couldn't resist bragging that he took her to his apartment several times. She screamed no over and over, as I told her she was fired, and I would be filing for divorce. She fell to her knees, realizing her life of luxury and endless fortune was gone. Her plans for renovating the kitchen were gone. Her beautiful fountain and garden were no longer hers. She told me she realized she was a stupid fool to spend time with AP or even trust another man. I just told her the unforgivable thing was her sleeping with him. I thanked AP for telling me the truth, while she continued crying her eyes out. She said she knew she didn't deserve my forgiveness, but if I didn't, she could never recover or move on in life. I said I didn't care what happened to her now because she proved herself to be less than worthy of my love and financial security. She was bawling as my uncle came out to the balcony and had security escort them out. She was banned from returning to the club. I partied hard for a few days and took a break from work. I met my next loving woman that way and got a lot of grief out of my system. I was glad I didn't have children with her and was able to stay strong and resist taking her back when she came to get her stuff out of the house. I made a lot of friends, and it wasn't hard to find someone worthy of the job my wife had at the tech shop. Opie, I'm so glad you were cautious and careful in the process of dating. Your attempt at finding a worthy spouse should have paid off better, but I think your observation and determination helped you and your uncle to catch her in her lies. You aren't one to be made a fool, Opie. She really messed up when she decided to cheat on you. There went her whole life and love, gone in an instant because she stopped considering you and the potential consequences of her decisions. I'm sure she didn't expect to get caught, which proves she was willing to lie and go behind your back for as long as she wanted to. I'm so glad you caught her with the help of your family and stood firm in your decision to dump her. There's a lot of women in that city alone that would love to meet and marry a successful man. Women that wouldn't be stupid enough to betray and lose you. Thank you for sharing this story with us. I wish you all the best. Now, let's get into our next story for today. I, 24, met my girlfriend, 20, online. She had lots of friends and a lot of hobbies and talents. I was hesitant with good reason to trust her. A little voice in my head told me that she would lie to anyone if she could get what she wanted. I dated her because I wanted her to prove that voice wrong. I didn't know who she was, so if anything, it was wrong of me to judge her. She fell for me fast. I was just honest with her, and our favorite thing to do together was skiing. We were extremely competitive. She'd been skiing since she was 8, and I'd been since I was 3. During the 2 years we dated, she met my closest skiing friends. All the friends I had were skiers. One of these was Mark. We weren't very close, but we did have some good laughs together, so I trusted him as part of the group. One day, I was one of the last ones on the slope. When I got inside the lodge, Mark and this one other guy I didn't recognize were talking in hushed voices with my girlfriend. I approached, and they became silent. She was facing away, so she didn't realize I was there. I heard her say, "We'll see who gets the prize." I asked what they were talking about, and she was startled I was standing behind her. She just stammered and looked to the two boys for help. Mark finally said they made a skiing wager amongst themselves. I asked what the prize was, and I swore I saw my girlfriend panic. She looked to Mark for the answer. He sat back confidently and said my girlfriend just bet $100 of my money that she would win the race against them. I was surprised she so confidently bet my money, but I was sure she could win, so I told them I backed it up. Mikey and the guy named Sal loved this. My girlfriend looked nervous. I told her not to worry about it because she was really good. When I said that, she just looked worse. The next day, at the top of the hill, I wished her luck. I followed behind them, even though I was not part of the race. She did extremely well, but Mark won. I congratulated him and paid him $100 right away. Then I went to kiss my girlfriend to assure her she did well, but she pulled away from me. She said she didn't deserve my kisses and started to tear up. I asked why she felt so bad, and Mark said it was because she was his prize for winning. My money was just a bonus he thought of at the last minute, but she was the prize for whoever won. I got up in his face and asked what he was talking about. He told me to ask her because it was all her idea. She wouldn't look at me, but she didn't deny it. I just left for the ski lodge, which was where they went to. She didn't care that I gave her a ride to the mountain today. She didn't care that now I was seeing her go home with Mark. It was the worst feeling ever. I forgot about the $100 for a while and didn't go skiing either. For 20 days, I only lived for my dog. Of course, my parents called me and I told them what was going on. It helped a little, but not very much. On the 21st day, my ex showed up at my door. Obviously, we were over at this point. She had $300 wrapped in a bow held out in her hand, and she opened her robe to reveal other things wrapped in bows. She said she needed to be with me. That's all she got to say before I grabbed the money out of her hand and slammed the door. I'm sure it was the first time she was ever denied by a man. She tried texting me a few hours later, so I took the time to tell her she needed to learn a lesson. That being that she can't just do whatever she feels like and expect things to work out in her favor. She shouldn't be able to cheat on me, ghost me for 20 days, and then receive forgiveness so I never speak to her again. I still haven't, And I hope this story gives people the strength to resist taking back or staying with a bad woman. Opie, I am sorry you went through this heartbreak. It was obvious that she did not care about your heart at all. She thought it was fine to bet herself as the prize, as long as you didn't find out, because as soon as you showed up, she freaked out. Mark just took advantage of you by lying twice. I'm glad you got your money back, plus interest. It was the least that inconsiderate girl could do. You handled things well, simply coping with your dog, relying on him and yourself for strength, along with other support contacts. That's a fine way to get through a breakup. No matter how hard it is, you can keep moving and grow stronger with time. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.